Hello guys, Alan here and welcome to the most authoritative Revit tutorial channel you can ever find on YouTube. And in today's video we're going to continue from where we left off in our schedule series, in part 1 of our schedule series, where we kind of like made our room schedule, where we talked about a lot of stuff. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of recap on that, but in this video today we are going to talk a little bit about our filter tool we have in here, and we're going to talk about the schedule modify tab, the key schedule of course, and we're going to also talk about calculated values and combined parameters. And if God being so good, we're also going to talk about images in schedule. All right, how we can schedule images inside of Revit. So I'm going to take my time and then we're going to talk more about all of this stuff. So I'm going to start off. First of all, we did this room schedule we have in here, which we have this ground floor in there. Now when you head into your properties panel, all right, and then you get in here, you're going to notice we have this filter tab in there. All right, so where we have this filter tab, I realized I didn't talk much about the filter tab. All right, so now this filter tab works in such a way that if we have, let's say we have several floors in our building, all right, we have the ground floor, the first floor, the second floor, all the way up to, let's say, the 13th floor. So if I want to schedule a floor out of my schedules, all right, maybe I want to schedule from just ground floor to first floor, and I want to schedule some floors out, I don't want to schedule that particular floor, this is where the filter tool comes in very handy. All right, the filter tool can obviously do a lot of works in filtering out your schedules in Revit, but that's just one of the ways you can actually use your filter tool. So what you can do is, let's say if I want to take off the ground floor, all right, so I'll just come in here and then I'll need to select what I want to filter out. All right, so now let's say I want to filter out my floor plans, my levels. So I'm going to select my level and then I'm going to select in here equals or does not equal. This is just English language, like I said in the previous part. So is at or above ground floor, so that is what it means in there. Then you select the level you want. All right, so we can write is at or above, or we can write is below or is at or below ground level. All right, so we can choose any of that in there. So I'm going to choose is at or below, and then we see what happens in there. And then I'm going to choose ground floor plan in there, and I can select OK in there, and you notice our first floor is missing in there. All right, that is because we chose is at or below. All right, so it's going to take out anything that is below or beneath the ground floor plan. That is why our first floor plan is gone out of in there. So we can come in here and then we can change this. We can change this to is at or below. Let's choose the first floor. Let's see what's happening in there. Nothing happens. Get back into the filter tab in there, and let's choose is below first floor. All right, so let's click on that, and we have our first floor also missing in there. So let's get back into the edit type in there, and we can choose is above in there, and let's still maintain the first floor. Let's see what happens, and that also gets missing in there. Our ground floor and everything also disappears in there. So let's get back in here. Let's choose is at or above, and then let's leave that first floor in there, and then you notice we have just the first floor in there. All right, our ground floor gets out of the way. All right, so I think I overheard Balkan architects say in them previous versions they only just had like just 4 filter tabs. All right, but now in current version, in the latest version, I'm using the 2025, so you can see in here we have a lot of filter tabs. We have like about 8 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 filter tabs in there. So we can filter like up to 8 types of filtering we can do in there. So we can still go ahead and still continue to filter even if it still remained our first floor. So that is if you have a lot of things you want to filter out in your schedule. So that is what this filter tool does in here. It's quite perfect. You can do that and also use that in any of your projects. All right, so I'm going to select this and keep this at none, and then bring back my ground floor plan in there. All right, so now let me just brush you guys through what is happening on this panel right here, on this schedule modify panel. All right, so with this modify schedule quantities we have in here, I'm just going to briefly take you guys through whatever is happening in here so you guys don't get missing in there. So in here we have the rooms, all right, where initially when we were creating our schedule, we had that also in there where we could select the project information and also the rooms in there. All right, so we have this in there, which is the room schedule, and then we have this in here where we can change that to a level, image, department, and all of that. All right, so we have this also in here, which is perfect. And then when you head into this tab right here, we have the calculated parameter. All right, so we have this calculated parameter in here. Now you can also get to this tab when you head straight into the fields tab, and then you can see we have that in here, which is the add calculated parameter. It's right in here, which is this calculated value you see in here, where we can either put in a formula or also put in a percentage in there. All right, so I'm going to talk more about this maybe in this video. I'm going to get into this maybe in this video. So you can access this calculated parameter by getting in here into your fields tab, and then you see this in here. Now with this add parameter from service is new. This is like working in the cloud, so this right here is new. All right, you wouldn't see this in Revit 2021 or 2020. I think maybe in 2023. I've never used 23 or 24 before. I just went straight away to 25. So this in here is new. This icon you see right here is new, so I'm going to get into that. This is like working with the cloud and Revit, so I'm going to cancel out of that. So that's the way you can get into your calculated value. All right, this is the calculated parameter in there. And then we have the combined parameters. Okay, so we have this also in here where we can combine parameters, where we can combine, let's say if we want to put in a formula, we want to add maybe, let's say, the height times something, we can use this combined parameters to get those values in there. I'm also going to get into this in this video. I'm also going to get into that right there. And you can also access this combined parameters by heading straight into the fields tab, and then you see this right here. This is the combined parameters we have in here, which is perfect. All right, we have this also in there. Now we have this insert in here, which is just to insert different add columns to your schedule. All right, so when you click on that, it takes you back into your room schedule where you can add more fields in there. All right, so we can add more fields. Maybe if we want to finish something, we can add more fields in there, which is also perfect. And then we can also delete a particular row in there. We can delete some columns in there and also delete that, or we can resize that, and we can also hide that. This is self-explanatory. I don't need to go through this. So if you want to delete that, you can click on this icon right there, then you delete that in there. And then we have also this resize, where we can resize spaces in there. But what you can also do is you can just move your mouse pointer closer in there, and then you can resize all of that in there, which is also perfect. And then we can hide that in there. We can hide a particular column in there. So I'm also going to use this maybe in this video to also get S to also do that. And then we can insert new data row, and then I'm going to talk more about this insert new data row, where we are going to talk about that. And then this is, I think this is to delete a row. All right, now you're going to notice with this delete, it has you're going to notice it has vertical lines. All right, vertical rectangles in there. When you pay close attention to it, you notice we have one going vertically. We have all of them going vertically. All right, and then you notice in one of those rectangles in there, it's shaded in a deep blue, which means that it's going to delete vertically. All right, that's why it has those rectangles vertically in there. And then with this delete, you notice it goes horizontally in there. All right, we delete rows in there. All right, so this is going to delete your rows, this is going to delete your columns. All right, so you need to pay attention to that. And then we have this icon also here, which is the freeze header. I'm also going to get into this in this video. I'm also going to talk about this in this video as well. And we can get in here, which is highlight in model, where we can select a particular row, let's say the conference room, and then we can highlight that in the model, where it's going to ask us if we can go into that view. So it's going to highlight this in the model in there, where we have this shown in the model. So it's highlighting that in the model where we have in there, which is also perfect. We can straight away get into the conference room by highlighting that in there. All right, by clicking on this, and then it's going to highlight that in the model, and then we can go straight away to that particular place we had that in there. And then we have the show, hide, isolate. So I'm going to talk more about this in this video, right? So this is just a little bit walkthrough to what is happening in here, so you guys don't feel lost. All right, it's very easy and very simple. Just follow along with every step in the way, and you're going to understand everything in there. So now I'm going to talk about key schedules. I'm not going to waste much time. If you are watching this video and you haven't liked or subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to my channel, because I'll be bringing out more classical tutorials like this, and you do not want to miss out on Revit. So make sure you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and drop a comment in the comment section if you have any comments. All right, so now I'm going to talk about the key schedules. All right, the key schedules we talked about earlier on. When I head into the edit fields in there, and I'm going to talk about the key schedules. All right, so now the key schedules, what the key schedules does is that it helps us in providing much more let me say much more information to our schedule. So I'm going to show you guys how that works. Now before I get into us creating our key schedules, I'm going to add in more fields in here. So I'm going to get into my properties panel, and then I'm going to go into the fields tab in there, click on edit, and we are going to have this pop-up menu. All right, so now let's say if I want to add some information in here, let's say something like the wall finish, I drag that in there. And also, well, when I'm done with the wall finish, I'm also going to talk about what else can I put in here. I want a floor finish. All right, and I'm also going to put a floor finish in there. All right, so I'm going to drag a floor finish and then a wall finish in there, and then I'm going to click on OK in there. All right, so now you notice Revit doesn't give any information for our wall finish. It doesn't provide any information for the wall finish and also the floor finish. That means that I didn't input that in my model. All right, so it means that I'll have to be doing that manually. Now if I was working on a much bigger project or a much larger project, it's going to be very tedious and very tiring for me to be able to input all of those finishes for each and every single space. It's going to be very tiring. All right, so this is where our key schedules can simplify that job for us. All right, our key schedule can make this look very easy, and within a twinkle of an eye we are done putting all this in, we are done keying all these informations in there. All right, so now first of all, before I start anything with our area, I want to create some totals for our area. So I'm going to head into formatting, and I'm going to click on area in there, and you can see in here it has no calculation, and I'm going to select this to calculate totals, which is going to calculate the totals for each and every single area on the ground floor plan and also for the first floor plan in there. So you see in there we have the total in there for the ground floor plan. So if you add all these areas, it's going to give me this grand total area in there, and then when you add all of this area for the first floor plan, it's going to give me that total which is in there, and the total combining both of them is giving me that 1949.59 meter square area. All right, so that's for the entire project. All right, that's the entire project's area. So now before I start in there, so let's say with my reception, with my wall finish in the reception. All right, so with the wall finish in the reception, let's say I just want paint in there. All right, so with the wall finish in the reception, I'm just going to do with paint. All right, so just normal paint in there, just normal paint in there. And with the floor finish, I'm going to go for a stone floor finish. All right, let's go for a stone flooring. So I'm just going to choose a stone flooring. Let me just enlarge this a little bit in there with a stone flooring. All right, so I'm going to use this for my reception. All right, so now with a conference room, now you're going to notice we have this drop down menu in here. So now anything you input in any of these fields, all right, you're going to see anytime you click on this drop down menu, they are going to appear in there, which is going to make life very simple for you to just select that. So if in a conference room, if I still want paint, I can just click on the drop down menu, and the paint I inserted for the reception area is also going to come in there. So you can just select that and it's going to come in there. But if you do not want paint, let's say with the conference room area with the wall finish, let's say I want a tile finish. All right, so now with the conference room area, I want a tile finish in there. All right, for the wall, I want a tiles for the wall, so tile finish. So when I click there, and with the conference room with the floor finish, I also want a tile in there, which is going to be 30 with a, let me just use the 600 by 600 tile finish in there. All right, so I want that in there. So when I come to the stage, with the stage, I want a wooden flooring. So if I click in here, you're going to notice I have tile finish, which I can select from these various ones I did in there. All right, so that is just by the way. So when you put those in there, you have the opportunity to click on this arrow right there, and then you can put in all of those finishes you initially did for those other finishes you had in there. All right, so I'm not going to do any of those. I'm not going to use any of those finish in there. I'm going to let us use our key schedule. All right, so now what we can do is we can also use our key schedule. So now I'm going to show you how you can also make use of your key schedules inside of Revit. So let's get back into creating our schedule. Let's go into the view tab, and then we're going to create a schedule. All right, so just click on your schedule quantities in there, and with this is still going to be, I'm just going to bring in all of those finishes I had in there, all of those finishes. Let me just put in that in there, which is the room. Okay, so we are going to schedule our room 2, and with this we are going to call this a key schedule. All right, we are going to change this. Make sure you change it from schedule building quantities to the schedule key. All right, the key schedules in there. Then you have the opportunity to also rename that. So I think I'm fine with the default name by Revit, the room style. I think I'm fine with that. And then you're going to click on OK in there. All right, so when you click on OK in there, so what I want to make the key schedule, so we have the key name in there, which is compulsory. All right, you're going to understand why that key name is supposed to be there. So you're going to understand why that key name is supposed to be there. All right, so I'm going to maintain that key name in there, and I want to use the key schedule to fill out all of this information. So I'm going to bring in my wall finish. So I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to move my wall finish in there, and also my floor finish. I'm going to move this also in there. So I'm going to make sure it's arranged in order. So we have the wall finish, floor finish. All right, this is perfect. So I'm going to click on that, and then I have this also in here. So this is also perfect. I have this in here, and then you notice we have no rows in here. All right, we have no columns, we have no rows. Columns are going vertically. All right, so with the rows we go horizontally. So make sure you don't forget that in there. So what you can do is you have to insert more data rows. All right, and how you can do that is to just click on this icon right here. So you can click on your insert data row, and you notice we have one data row inserted, and then I can add more, add more, add more, add as many as you want, guys. So just make sure you add as many as you want in there, and it's perfect. So now we have to fill out all of this information. So I can delete all of these rows by coming in here and then finding that delete row, and then I delete that in there, and you notice it deletes all of that in there. All right, so now with the key name, I'm going to go back into my room schedule, and let me see what's happening in here. So with the key name, this project doesn't have, like, since it's a design for a church, it doesn't have, let's say, an office. It's not an office building where maybe I have the same kind of office in another floor or on another floor. All right, so let's say on ground floor I have the same kind of office on the first floor, and the first floor I also have the same kind of, let's say, washroom area also on the ground floor. Right, with this it's just different spaces throughout the entire project. So I'm just going to do some examples in here so you guys can use that same knowledge and also use that to apply in different kind of projects that you might be working on, guys. So I'm going to start off. So let's say I have the stage in here. So when I get into my room schedule in here, so I'm going to start off with a stage. So I'm going to call this stage with a key name. I'm going to call this stage, and then with a wall finish, in there, I'm going to give this a white paint. All right, so let me just put in there a white paint. You notice my A comes in much more often. I don't know what's wrong with my keyboard in there. So with the floor finish for my stage, I want it to be a wooden flooring in there. All right, so now we are done with the stage. Let's get into the room schedule, and let's say if I want to use the same finishes on the stage for the bookshop, I can use that for the bookshop as well. So let me just use the foyer in there. So with the foyer, so let me just put in here foyer. So you just make sure you type in the name in there, foyer. All right, so we have, let me just delete all of that, keep this in here, and let me just call this foyer. And with the wall finish, for my foyer, when I click on the drop down menu, you notice I have this white paint tile finish even from the previous schedule. All right, even from the previous schedule, you are still going to get all of those finishes you use. So with the foyer, I'm still going to go with paint, and then with that, I'm going to go with a stone flooring in there. All right, so now with the next one, I'm going to call this children. Let me just instrument area. All right, so let me just use this one, so the instrument area in there. All right, let me just extend this, open this up a little bit. So we have the instrument area, and with that, I also want to use, let's say, a paint. And with the instrument area, I'm going to go for tile. I'm going to go for tile, just tile in there. So we have this room schedule in there. All right, so we've created some simple key schedule we have in here, which we are going to use to fill out all of this information. So this is how the key schedules work. So let's say if I have an office space in here and I have the same office space, all I have to do is just come in here, office space, office style 1. So when I put in office style 1, I just input all those informations in here, and then when I come in here, I'm going to just key in all those information. Very easy. All right, so when you get back into this room schedule you have in here, just make sure you go straight into the field tab, head back into this field tab you have in here, and we have to load in this room style schedule we had in there. All right, we'll make sure we load it into this software, into this schedule we have here. So I'm going to look for that schedule, which is this room style name. You remember we named that the default room style. So I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to move this in here to our project. So I'm going to click on finish, and then I have this in here. So when I come in here to the stage, and I just click on this drop down menu and I select stage, you're going to notice those finishes applies quickly with that. All right, so it's going to apply the same finishes I placed in here for that. So with the stage, it's going to make sure it puts the white paint floor finish. Is going to give it a wooden. All right, so let me see. I have bookshop. So bookshop, what am I going to use? So the bookshop, I think I'm going to use the same area. I'm going to use the same floor finish and materials for the instrument area. And with the children's service, I'm going to use what I had in the foyer. And so that is how that works in there. It's very simple. So you just make sure you create that key schedule, and then you can apply that to every information you need in here, which is very, very simple. And later on, you can hide this entire column. So we can hide all of this in there, and then we hide all of that in there. And we can choose to unhide that as well in there, which is also that in there. So this is how you use this to work in there. So we can decide to delete that entire column, and then this still maintains that in there. All right, so this is how we work inside of Revit, how you can use your key schedules to fill out all of these informations. So I hope you found that very useful. We are going to leave that as it is, so you can just go ahead and just fill out all this information. Since this is a tutorial, I'm going to end here, and I'm going to move on to the next topic. So with our next topic, we are going to talk about the calculated value. All right, this calculated value you see in here, how we can actually apply some formulas in there to calculate all of that in there for us. All right, so we're going to do some small calculations in there. So first of all, I'm going to delete all of these columns. All right, I'm going to delete all of these fields. What I can do is I can quickly also go into my fields tab, and then I can click on this and then move this out, click on this and then also move this out, and then finish that. So I have all of those gone out of the way. All right, so we have all of those gone in there, which is also perfect. So we are going to talk about the calculated value. All right, you can access this calculated value, like I said, when you head into the fields tab. You're going to see this F frequency sign. If you're studying science, you have this in there with this fx in there. All right, which is to add a calculated parameter. All right, so now with this project, what am I going to calculate? All right, so we can set up any calculated parameter for this in there, and I want to calculate something. What can I use to calculate? That is when we are doing the material takeoff. All right, so if we get into the material takeoff, I'm going to use that, but I'm going to just create a simple example for you guys so you guys can actually understand this inside of Revit. All right, you can calculate absolutely anything, all right, inside of Revit. So with this, I'm going to add in more fields. All right, so I'm going to get into the fields tab, and with this, let me just say I'm going to count. So now we are going to so now we brought in our accounts in there, which we can use to make an example of the calculated value. All right, so you guys understand what is happening in there. So I'm going to head into the calculated value, and then I'm going to call this, let me just call this number LC. Right, let me just call this number LC. You can name this whatever you want. So we have this in there, which is perfect. You can leave this at number, and with the formula I'm going to calculate this by the number, and with the count is just counting all of this in there. So number, and let's start with the number, and then we can put this in here, use our plus sign, and number plus number times the area. All right, we can actually do the number times area. So let's just cancel this and let's just wipe this away. Number times the area in there. All right, so we can use this number times area. Since this is in the total area, we'll have to bring it down to per 1 meter square in there. All right, so this is perfect, and let's just finish this improper use of Boolean expressions. So it's not going to work for this unless we had something of like the cost in there. So you can basically add this and add this if you want to do an addition and all that. It's just going to put in formulas. All right, you have to put in formulas that really work. That is when Revit is going to accept that. You have to put in formulas that really work in there. All right, so that's just by the way, and we are going to move on to the combined parameters. All right, so we can get in here, which is the combined parameters. Click on that, and when you click on that combined parameters, we have this in here where we can use this. All right, we can use this combined parameters to, let's say, if we are adding up the height and also adding a width of something. All right, so let's say we are multiplying a height and width. All right, this is where we can use those in there. So you can put this in there. You are multiplying, let's say if we want to area, first of all we bring in our area, and we want to bring in, so we want to multiply the area by number. So let's just select number, let's put this in there. So you notice down here we have the preview of value. All right, so we will make sure we put this in there. So with the preview, this in there, I'm going to change this to in there to multiplication, and click on that, and we have this in here, and just click in here and then put in a space. Okay, let me get into here and put in a space in there, and I have this also in here. With this, I'm going to take this out, so I have area times number in here. So you can check your preview to actually fill up all of those spaces in there. So I can put in a space also in here and put in one more space in here to create that space. All right, so we have this in here, area times number. All right, so we can click on OK, and it's going to multiply that for us and put that in there. All right, so we have this in there, which is the area times number, which is just to combine parameters. So that's just by the way, so you can use that to, if you have parameters you want to combine. All right, so you can actually move this. So since it's area times number, I can get into my edit fields, and I would want this to also be on top right there, and I want it to be in the middle where I have the number, and I want my area to also cut in here, and I can put this in here. So I have the number here and area here. So we have the number times area in there, which is this figure, this column you see in here. So we have this in here, and what this does is you can only use this to change, I think, the header in here. All right, where we can change the font in there and also select all of that in there. We can select all of this and merge and unmerge and all of that. All right, so we can insert image and also do all of that also in there. All right, so thank you guys for watching. I'm going to end here, and we are going to continue in our next part where we are going to be talking more about material takeoffs and all of that. So we are going to be doing a little material takeoffs, talk about that in our final parts, and all of those other schedules we had in there, all of these other schedules. So we are going to talk all of these schedules you see in here: the view list, the notebook, the note block, the sheet list, and also the material takeoff. All right, so we are going to talk more about that in our next part. So thank you guys for watching. If you are watching and you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to my channel. I'll catch you guys in the final part. Peace out. I'm still working real hard on a Saturday. A future I don't see from a mile away.